Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 12. Rahugana converses with Jadabhara. Text 3. Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Adhyatma yoga gratitam tabuktam.
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Adhyatma yoga gratitam tabuktam.
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
तस्माद् भवन्तं मम संशयार्थं
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
रक्षामि पश्चात् अधुना सबोधं
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
अध्यात्मयोगा गृहीतं तवोकतं
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
अज्ञाहि कौतूहलचेतस्व मे
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
तस्मात् भवन्तं मम संशयार्थं
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
प्रक्ष्यामि पश्चात् अधुना सुबोधम्
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
अध्यात्मयोगग्रथितं तवोक्तम्
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
आख्यायि कौतूहलचेतसो मे
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me. Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Prakshami paschat aduna subodham.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Adhyatma yoga gratitam tavoktam.
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
Akyahi kautuhala chetaso me.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Vaishnavis.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam. Prashyami paschat aduna subodham. Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam. Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Tasmad bhavantam mama sanshayartham.
Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayatam.
Prakshami paschat adhuna subodham.
Prashyami paschat aduna subodham.
Adhyatma yoga gratitam tavoktam.
Adhyatma yoga vratitam tabuktam.
Akyahi kautuhala chetaso me.
Adhyahi gotu hala chetaso me.
Tasmat, therefore, Bhavantam, to you, Mama, of me, Samshaya Artam, the subject matter that is not clear to me. Prakshami, I shall submit. Paschat, afterwards. Aduna, now. Subodham, so that it can be clearly understood. Adhyatma Yoga, of mystic instructions for self-realization. Gratitam, as composed. Tava, your. Uktam, speech. Akyahi, please explain again. Kautuhala, Chaitasa, whose mind is very inquisitive to understand. The mystery of such statements. May to me. Translation. Whatever doubts I have about a particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a simple way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand this clearly. Purport. The Vedic literature instructs, Tasmad Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shreya Uttamam. An intelligent man must be very inquisitive to know the transcendental science deeply. Therefore, one must approach a guru, a spiritual master. Although Jatabharata explained everything to Maharaj Rahugana, it appears that his intelligence was not perfect enough to understand clearly. He therefore requested a further explanation. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Tad Vitti Pranipatena Pariprasnena Sevaya. The student must approach a spiritual master and surrender unto him fully. Pranipatena. He must also question him in order to understand his instructions. Pariprasnena. One should not only surrender to the spiritual master, but also render loving service unto him. Sevaya. So that the spiritual master will be pleased with the student and explain the transcendental subject matter more clearly. A challenging spirit before the spiritual master should be avoided if one is at all interested in learning the Vedic instruction in depth. Translation again. Whatever doubts I have about a particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a simple way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand this clearly. Om Agana Chimadandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. As we approach Gaur Purnima, let us remember that we have gathered here for Srimad Bhagavatam class by the authority of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who emphasized hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan wrote so many literatures to emphasize our immersion in Srimad Bhagavatam. As I always like to point out, Sanatana Goswami, in his Sri Krishna Leela Stava, points out that every syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is saturated with Krishna prema. Now you might say, well, you don't see that. Just as Maharaj Rahugana here is saying, I don't grasp clearly what you're saying. But as we become more advanced in bhakti, through devotional service, the more Srimad Bhagavatam reveals itself to us as the association of Sri Krishna. Our mundane intelligence, when it predominates, tells us, how can it be that simply by hearing from one particular book, you have the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself? But you see, this mentality is the ascending process. That I look at my faculties, my intelligence, my mind, my senses, and then what is real, what is possible is based on what I can perceive. Whereas bhakti is about the descending process. Avaroha bandha. It's coming down. If we reject what's coming down, this is impersonalism. How can we understand the Supreme Absolute Truth without the Supreme Absolute Truth revealing Himself to us? But because we're attached to this body, attached to our senses, we consciously or unconsciously demand, Krishna, come before me. Bhagavatam, every syllable it said is saturated with Krishna praying. Okay, let's see it. What's happening? I don't see the flood of love of Krishna in this book. Okay, 10th canto Krishna Leela, all right. But the other cantos, I don't know. We have this demanding attitude. Let the Supreme Personality of Godhead come to me on my demand. Because this is what material existence does to you. It makes you a demander. It makes you want, as Prabhupada would always say, the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be your order supplier. Like Krishna's a takeout service, takeaway service. You dial him up, or you go online, give me this, give me that, I'm your devotee. So the demand, and this is something Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, we demand to see Krishna according to our program so that we can exploit even Krishna for our enjoyment. Because that's what material life is all about. There is nothing innocent about material existence, although we like to present ourselves as an innocent, mild enjoyer. We impose that kind of consciousness on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Reveal yourself in a way that makes sense to me and makes sense to my senses. This is not the humility required for understanding Srimad Bhagavatam. Rahugana Maharaj is demonstrating upon getting himself together and refocusing, he's now, after abandoning his arrogance, showing the real way to receive transcendental knowledge. You see, more important than seeing Krishna face to face is hearing about Krishna from authorized sources. Now, how can that be? Something can be right in front of your eyes and you don't recognize. But if you hear from an authorized source, then you can start to comprehend what's right in front of you. Just like, as you know, when Krishna was present to physical vision 5,000 years ago, very few understood who he is. Very few understood Krishna Tattva. They thought he was the most powerful person on the planet. they didn't understand. He's Swayam Bhagavan. Some thought he was a demigod. A few thought he's the super soul. But very few understood that he is the Sarva Karna Karna, cause of all causes. But Krishna is right there before their eyes. Similarly, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in Navadvipa, very few understood his glories, and he kept those glories hidden. Every once in a while, before he went to Gaya and took sannyas, every once in a while, before he went to Gaya to do the ceremonies for his father, and then eventually he took sannyas. Before that, he would just give a glimpse of his being the Supreme Personality Godhead. And he would tell those he gave a glimpse to, don't tell anyone. Sometimes people would visit his house when he was a Nimai, the little boy. And Nimai would do his pranks. You know the story about how the Brahmana came to spend the night, and Jagannath Mishra offered the Brahmana all facility, and the Brahmana needed to do his puja and make an offering to his deity, but Nimai would always disrupt the whole process again and again. So finally, the Brahmana had the bright idea, intelligent idea. I'll wait until night when Nimai is asleep, and in the middle of the night, I'll finally complete my puja and make the offering. And you know, again, the same thing happened. Everyone else is asleep, and Nimai comes. So then, Nimai revealed to the Brahmana, "You're making offerings to me, here I am. What's the problem? You're doing the puja for their lordships, well, you called me, I'm here." So he showed his opulences to the Brahmana and forbade the Brahmana to tell anyone, because it wasn't the time yet for Nimai Pandit to display his real mission, drowning the world in bhakti and feeling the separation from Krishna, because he has taken the position of Srimati Radharani, taken her emotions. Wasn't the time yet for that. And you know how during his student days, Nimai Pandit was the star of Navadvipa. He would stroll around the city, challenging everyone with logic, challenging them to debates. And you know how he could argue one side and then switch and attack the side that he had just presented, and then switch from that. And so when he would walk the streets during his student days, everyone would avoid him because they didn't want to be defeated. Because, you know, Navadvipa was the center of learning and logic and all kinds of, everything Vedic, I always explain. Navadvipa was the center of everything Vedic except the conclusion of the Vedas. They were super paka. Very paka brahmanas, knew all the supplementary Vedic items, but no one knew Krishna. And this reality pained the devotees so much. And then here is Nimai Pandit, the master of logic. He was so intense and so absorbed in logical debates that the Vaishnavas, when they saw him walking in Navadvipa, they crossed the other side of the road because they didn't want to be drawn into a whole debate just based on logic. They would try to avoid him. At the same time, they would always say, if Nimai Pandit would ever become a devotee, That would be so extraordinary. He's so inconceivably intelligent. He's insurpassable. Oh, they would pray, dear Lord, let him become a devotee one day. And sometimes Nimai Pandit would reply to them, may your prayers become true. Make it happen that one day I'll be a devotee. So that was Nimai Pandit in Navadvip. He didn't reveal himself, only confidentially. One time at Advaita Acharya's house, because Advaita Acharya has a home in Shantipur as well as Navadvip. So Advaita Acharya was having a kirtan, because the Vaishnavas really had to huddle together because they were made fun of by all the Vedic specialists in Navadvip. What's all this? The Vedic specialists who knew everything, as I said, except the conclusion of the Vedas, were making fun of the Vaishnavas. What's this kirtan? You're howling the names of Krishna. Are you hungry? You're keeping us up at night. You're bringing down upon us the rage of the Muslim regime. You're ruining the Hindu religion. Why are you wasting your life in this way? So the Vaishnavas really had to huddle together. They felt persecuted by the population's attitudes. And sometimes there was fear of persecution by the regime. And these Vedic specialists would threaten, we're going to turn you in to the Mohammedan regime. They'll take care of you. So there was all this kind of pressure. Peer pressure, social pressure, fear of government intervention. This is all going on as Nimai Pandit is growing up. But let's focus on one incident when he was just a little child, a wee lad. Advaita Acharya and his Vaishnava associates are having kirtan and a Krishna Katha session. And somehow or other, they look and they see there's little baby Nimai. Prakli Camp just started walking and his little friends. And what are you doing here? Nimai said, you called me. But the Vaishnavas couldn't understand what that meant. So this is an example of how something can be right in front of your eyes, but you don't recognize it. And of course, what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Nam prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavita. I don't reveal myself to everyone. You can't see me for what I really am unless I want you to. And we resent that. According to mundane science, this sounds impossible. Because to accept what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, you have to accept that your perception is under the control of someone else. And you don't want to do that because that ruins your material existence. Material existence means you want to be the controller and enjoyer. When I'm doing outreach programs, I often explain that as soon as you want to enjoy materially, even in the slightest, most innocent way, there must be control. You cannot separate control from material enjoyment. You can check this out during your daily activities. You want to satisfy yourself in some small or big way, there has to be an element of control there, even if it's just moving your eyebrows, changing the tone of your voice. All these niceties, but still, it's about control. You're thinking how to influence the situation so I get an outcome that's, well, not only good for me, but good for everyone, of course. Right? Everyone will be happy if things go my way. So even the most subtle gesture is geared for that purpose. I need to control just a little bit in order to be satisfied. So therefore, it's difficult for us to accept that sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto matasmitir jnanam apohanam cha. Krishna says, I'm seated in everyone's heart. From me, as a controller in your heart, comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. That means we can only understand Krishna Tattva, the science of the Supreme, if we please Krishna. And I explained many times that any dignified person actually behaves in this way. Let's say you're walking down the street, Dang Street, and some stranger comes running up to you. Excuse me, I want to understand you. You'll be taken aback, right? Especially if you're a lady, like, no, really, I want to understand you. Tell me about yourself. You expect that, well, there should be some social process of becoming acquainted, and then after quite some time, if we build a relationship, I may start talking about myself. But no, if you're walking down the street and someone comes up to you, how's your relationship with your wife? Tell me everything now. How did you feel when you first saw him? So this is the attitude that the mundane mentality applies to Krishna. That mundane mentality can't accept that the perception of Krishna is in Krishna's hands. Rahugana Maharaj is getting the point now. You know how he first misbehaved with Jad Bharata, having Jad Bharata recruited as a palanquin carrier, and then complaining about Jad Bharata's behavior in carrying the palanquin, because Jad Bharata saw ants on the ground while he's bearing the palanquin with the other palanquin carriers, and he was trying to not step on the ants, which meant that he was out of sync with the other palanquin carriers. And so the king was getting a bit of a bumpy ride. So he complained, hey, what's wrong with you? Have you no brain? And he got a bit sarcastic. Oh, I know. You're carrying this palanquin all alone, eh? Of course, there were other carriers. You're carrying the palanquin all alone and you're fatigued, huh? So just based on that, you're getting 3 chapters in Srimad Bhagavatam as Jad Bharata takes him apart. And it's all about how you're not the body. Sometimes we forget how important it is to understand you're not the body, because unless you understand that, how can you then understand you have a spiritual existence and you have spiritual activities and spiritual qualities? So this is why we hammer away on the preliminaries of Bhagavad Gita. Because until you accept that you're different from matter, you cannot then start focusing on the spiritual realities, your spiritual identity, qualities, activities. I remember once in Mumbai, Srila Prabhupada was in his rooms, and he gave his, I would say, millionth example of how you're not the body. Another analogy upon all the other analogies that he had already given. And then he looked at the devotees and said, do you know why I can constantly come up with these analogies and examples to convince people they're not the body? Do you know why? He said, I'm always thinking about it. Wait a minute, Prabhupada is always thinking about how to present we're not the body? Isn't that quite elementary? But as you see from the behavior of Rahugana Maharaj, when the head is clogged up, when the intelligence is clogged by material activities, it's very difficult to understand this simple point. You understand it to whatever extent due to your bhakti. Therefore, Krishna's siksha, his instructions given in Bhagavad Gita, resonate with you because there's varying degrees of devotional service. What Rahugana is saying is that I don't have that great fortune. I misunderstood you, Jadbar, and your words bewilder me, but I think there's something there. And I can see that you're not an ordinary person. I see that now. Therefore, I'm begging you to enlighten me. In fact, as you may have heard in verse 1 of this chapter, he said, O most exalted personality, you are not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We sing this in the morning. Sakshat Karitmenas Namaskar. What does that mean? That the spiritual master is not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, we understand that this is not Mayavad, that the two are the same. What it means is that the service of speaking about Krishna and teaching Krishna is so precious that that activity makes the speaker identical with the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of that activity. This is a little hard for us, I understand, to actually grasp. Well, non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, well, how can that actually be, you know? We have to appreciate the exalted nature of speaking Krishna Katha and distributing and teaching to others about Krishna. Because we downplay that, therefore this Sakshat Hari bewilders us sometimes. All right, the Guru's not God, but still identical. Well, in what way? And, maybe this is poetry. That's it. So we're missing the point. Speaking about Krishna is so dear to Krishna. Distributing Krishna, training in bhakti is so dear that Krishna says, this is as good as me. In other words, this is as good as it gets. And we said, nah, can't be. You mean when so-and-so Das or Dasi, been a devotee for a few years, is trying to speak about Krishna and train others in Krishna, that such a devotee is at least in line to be as good as Krishna because of that activity. Lord Chaitanya says the same thing. Wherever you go, whomever you meet, teach the science of Krishna. That statement is the same as Krishna saying, surrender to me. So we have a difficulty with this point of Sakshatari because we don't appreciate how inconceivably divine the activity of giving Krishna's instructions is. But the more we focus on that reality, the more things start to click. Sakshatari. He's not Hari, but then again, because of that service of delivering Krishna Katha, that identity, that sameness is there because of that activity. That activity is so precious that Krishna says, you speak about me, you teach about me, you're as good as me. It's Krishna's generosity to highlight this activity. So Rahugana is coming to his senses. He's recognized, in the dress of a friend of a Brahmana, you are hiding your transcendental blissful position. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. See, Jat Bharat he's the perfect example of what is known as speaking truth to the powerful. Even though he's acting as an avaduta in this lifetime, he's a master of ISKCON communications. He brought the king to his senses. course, we don't take the position of avadhutas. Won't be very effective for our outreach. You try to act like an avadhuta and you'll hear from Bhakta Prabhu. He'll pull you up straight. No one will take us seriously if we start acting like avadhutas. As Prabhupada would always say, without these temples and buildings, no one will come and listen to us. We can't do like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan and just find a tree and sit under a tree and expect people to come. Oh, you're a saintly person. Let me hear from you. It doesn't work like that. So we're practicing yukta vairagya, using everything in Krishna's service. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that this yukta vairagya, we've heard the expression many times, right? Using everything in Krishna's service. He explains this is actually very mystical. We may take it in a very casual way. Yukta vairagya, use it in Krishna's service, Prabhu. But actually it's a very high concept. How to not reject anything that has value for Krishna's pleasure. But Jad Bharat is on the avadhuta program, just as Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu is known as Avadhuta Chandra, the moon of all the avadhutas, the moon of all those who pay no attention to Vedic behavior, pay no attention to what's socially acceptable, just ignore all that. That's a service to show that actually the spirit soul is independent of matter. As the Shastra says, asambhokayam purusha. There's never any actual contact between the spirit soul and the material energy. But the false ego, as Jad Bharat will explain, the false ego imagines the connection, and that's what gets you in all the trouble. Matter is here, the spiritual energy is there, it's always. But in between, in the gap, the false ego imagines, I'm the body, I'm the mind, I'm material. So as Bhagavatam explains, the false ego is the imaginary junction between matter and spirit. So it's the false ego, as Jad Bharat will explain, that gets you in all the trouble. It's the false ego that dominates, and therefore you think, I am this body, these are my family members, everything in relation to this body is mine. By regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting Hare Krishna, this false ego that's gotten us into so much trouble, gotten us into the ocean of samsara, it gradually starts to subside. And then you identify as Krishna's servant, which is real ego. And of course, Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu demonstrate this so dramatically. Even though they are Vishnu Tattva, they are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they make it clear, we are servants of Lord Chaitanya, we are the servants of His servant. They take delight in demonstrating servitude to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You know how in Chaitanya Charitamrita you read. Sometimes Advaita Acharya, he's sitting quietly. You can try this sometimes. You can follow in his footsteps. You're sitting quietly, and suddenly you jump up in the air. I'm the servant of Lord Chaitanya. I'm the servant of Lord Chaitanya. I'm the servant of His servants. And you sit down quietly again. I don't recommend you try this on the tram when you go to it. But when you're amongst family and friends, that is the real ego asserting itself. But what else does Rahugana Maharaj say that is now motivating Jad Bharat to speak more? And that's what a real disciple wants to do. I want to motivate the spiritual preceptor to speak more. And so, Rahugana Maharaj clarifies his own position. This is really where I'm at. Let me confess to you. My body is filled with dirty things. Bones, blood, urine, stools, so forth. And my vision has been bitten by the serpent of pride. Due to my material conceptions, I am diseased. Your nectarian instructions are the proper medicine for one suffering from such a fever, and they are cooling waters for one scorched by the heat. Such a beautiful change of mentality by Rahugana Maharaj, and he's demonstrating how to approach the spiritual preceptor. He's demonstrating that. Present yourself as materially conditioned, bitten by the serpent of pride. Here's my material reality. I'm identifying with the body, which is filled with such dirty things. But your instruction, your siksha, is the proper medicine for someone suffering in material existence. You've got to actually have some realization of your real position in material life. And Jug Bharat was able to cut through to Rahugana Maharaj, cut through Rahugana Maharaj's pride and ignorance and get him to see, this is where you're really at. You're criticizing me, but you should understand your position. And in other words, he pulled Rahugana Maharaj up straight, as we would say, and allowed him to see his own conditioned nature. And Rahugana Maharaj is being grateful for that. You practically done the impossible. You humbled me. I'm grateful and I want to hear more from you. I made a huge mistake, a huge offense. I allowed you to be recruited into my palanquin carrying brigade. And then when you seemed to be functioning improperly, I criticized you and made sarcastic jabs at you. Now, I've switched gears completely, and I want to hear your explanation of all these statements you gave. Because Jug Bharat told him that right now you're a king and someone else is the servant, but that can easily become reversed. And here I am under the palanquin carrying you, but my body is made of matter, the palanquin is made of matter, your body that's on top of the palanquin is made of matter, yet this pile of matter on top of the palanquin calls itself a king. So you say, sarcastically, that obviously I'm tired from carrying the palanquin because I'm stumbling. But actually, your statement has no value because I'm not this body, so what does fatigue have to do with me? So these chapters of the dialogue between Rahugana Maharaj and Jug Bharat are so liberating they can get us out of the bodily concept of life. And you see the troubles escalating in the world because people are taking more and more shelter of body identification. The body matters. Your bodily identification means so much. What kind of bodily identification do you have? You've got to really embrace your bodily identity. That's truth. And everyone should respect your bodily identity. And the more you glorify your body identity, the more there'll be peace and prosperity. No way. As Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained to Srila Prabhupada when they first met, Bhakti is so crucial and important, it can't wait for anything. Now that is a striking statement to make to someone who was, at that time, Srila Prabhupada in his external activities was very much involved in Gandhi's independence movement. And here you go see a sadhu and he says, not that important, nothing comes before bhakti. This is a very bold statement to tell to someone who's an activist in a movement to materially liberate a society from colonization. And you say, not important. Bhakti cannot wait for anything. Doesn't matter whether there's political subjugation, exploitation, colonization or not. We must present the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur cutting through. And Srila Prabhupada, by his own words, said, we had a bit of an argument. But, he said, in the end, my Guru Maharaj prevailed, and I recognize the spreading of Mahaprabhu's movement is in the most capable hands. So these days, you see the bhakti identification increasing more and more. Of course, we sympathize with persons who are being materially exploited without a doubt. At the same time, we know the solution is not to increase the body identification. So, on the one hand, there's appreciation for anyone suffering. On the other hand, we know the solution is not to become more absorbed in your body identity. So this requires perhaps some maturity in that there's sympathy and compassion. Just because someone is suffering materially, being exploited materially, we say, oh, anyway, you're not the body. No sympathy for me. You're not the body. No, we are compassionate to anyone who's suffering. It's just that we know the solution to the suffering is not to increase the body identification. But sometimes when trying to explain these things, Prabhupada would just shake his head and say, because news reporters sometimes wouldn't get what he was trying to present. And he would just say, it's very difficult to understand. Krishna consciousness is actually for very intelligent persons. And when he said very intelligent persons, he didn't mean necessarily your academic degrees. He meant you had to have some kind of propensity for spiritual insight. So therefore, we're mass distributing the opportunity for devotional service. Prasad, books, outreach, temples. It's all to give people the good fortune so that they can start to understand. Just like Rahugana made his turnaround. So today he's saying, whatever doubts I have about a particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions, all Rahugana told him was, you're not the body. All Jud Bharat told Rahugana was, you're not the body. But Rahugana is saying, mysterious yoga instructions. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a simple way so that I can understand. My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand this clearly. Jud Bharat has created inquisitiveness in Rahugana Maharaj. You said some things that I can't understand, but I sense that what you said is crucial for my well-being. So I'm going to ask you some questions later, but for now, please repeat what you've already said. And so you're going to see Jud Bharat expand upon his original dialogue with Rahugana Maharaj. He's going to say the same thing, but in a more expansive way. So it's very fascinating. And certainly, by your studying this dialogue, you'll become cleansed from the scourge of body identification. And this is all part of Bhagavatam's program to saturate you with Krishna prema. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, you're associating with Krishna. Your heart's becoming cleansed, and attraction for the Supreme Personality of God is being revived. Krishna become more and more aroused. And this process is the greatest benefit for your human form of life. All right, any questions? Yes?
Thank you, Gurudev, for the nice class. I was, mentioned about we can't demand from Krishna to reveal himself to us. But sometimes we pray, and I was wondering if you can say, is it okay to pray to Krishna when you're praying that, please give us the spiritual experience or some vision of that the reality, so we sort of...
You want to pray for service to Krishna. Through service you get everything. So your prayer is, how can I be a better servant? How can I serve you better for your satisfaction? And then everything comes. Bhaktyamam abhijanati. Only by devotional service can I be understood. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was demonstrating, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your name? That's Nama Seva. He's begging for more intimate service to the holy name. So it's not like you're begging for an enjoying experience. Oh, Krishna, give me a spiritual experience that I can enjoy. A mature devotee doesn't do that. In the beginning, it's okay. You're approaching Krishna, that's all right. We're happy that you're approaching Krishna. But as you become more purified, you just pray for Krishna's pleasure. That's what the residents of Vrindavan are demonstrating. Even when the cowherd boys say that they're hungry, they're actually thinking Krishna should be hungry. So if we say we're hungry, then Krishna will stop and eat something. Everyone's simply thinking about Krishna's pleasure only. When they beg for Krishna's protection from some danger, they're thinking, Krishna can't enjoy his Leela without us. Therefore we shouldn't die. Because that won't be good for his pleasure. Bhakta Prabhu.
Thank you, Maharaj. Sometimes if we pray for service, within a temple confines, there's sometimes not enough service for everyone. And so thereby the heart is yearning to have some service, especially if you're in a temple, but it's not fulfilled. What does that person then do?
We should be overflowing with service opportunities. Melbourne is a big city. Millions of people haven't heard about Krishna. Millions of people have not tasted prasad in spite of your restaurant expansion. There's still millions of people who haven't tasted prasad, who haven't received books, who know nothing about Krishna. And we need more chakras of service opportunities. That's up to you, big local leaders, to sort out. Of course, Melbourne is not the size of New York City, but still, I remember Prabhupada in New York in 1976, devotees were talking about the temple. And Prabhupada said, why the temple? Why not 10 or 12? But of course, executing that kind of plan takes intelligent management and coordination. And there's a time for everything. I know in New Zealand, Prabhupada said something very astonishing when they were building the first temple and attempting to build the first temple in New Zealand, in the Auckland area. Prabhupada said, why one temple? Every town in this country should have a temple. I mean, towns in New Zealand, that means 2,000 people. So we're expansionists. And by the expansion, it creates more service opportunities. But we have to expand intelligently and competently with management, that's all. But we are expansionists. There's no doubt about it. The flood of love of Krishna is always increasing. The more the Panchatattva dance, they make it more easy for us to understand Krishna and expand Krishna consciousness. As Kali Yuga moves on, you see that traffic problems increase, people have a difficult time driving to another side of the city. Things get so intricate. COVID restrictions, you can't go past 5 kilometers from your home, and life gets complicated. So, if we have competent leaders and a competent plan at the right time, according to what the leaders designate at the right time, it can always be expansion. And that expansion, if intelligently executed, creates more service opportunities. So this is something for you local wonders to meditate on. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, can you please share some practical tips for us to get out of our bodily identity?
Get out of what?
The bodily identifying ourselves with the body on a daily basis.
He's asking for practical tips. Step 1, step 2, step 3 for getting out of bodily identity on a daily basis. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Hear Bhagavatam every day, and your heart will be cleansed. Chant the Hare Krishna mantra, your heart will become cleansed. Serve the Vaishnavas. Be greedy for service opportunities. Yes, here is the legitimate protest movement that you can make. You ready for this? The legitimate Vaishnava protest movement. These are the legitimate politics Vaishnava politics that you can make. There's not enough service. I want to do so much. Where's the service? That's the only legitimate protest you can make. If there is Bhaktadas, he's one of the leaders, you can harass him. Prabhu, I want to do service. Where's the service? You're entitled to do that. You can get, what do you call them, picket signs and find out where it is. March back and forth in front of his house carrying a sign. This leader has not provided me with service opportunities. I want to contribute. What does Bhagavatam say? Pranaya artaya diya vacha. You can give your life. Prana. Arta, you can give your wealth. Diya, your intelligence. Vacha, your words. Give it all. So yes, you can protest. I want to do service. I want to give to Krishna. This is a glorious headache that you can present to the leader. Anything else? Yes?
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, my question is on Pratyaksha. It appears that Pratyaksha is the antithesis of Shabda Praman. We hear that we are not our senses, but then there will be breakfast served shortly and everybody's senses will be...
I don't know. What do you eat for breakfast? Krishna Prasad. Well, it's actually for more than your material senses. It nourishes the body, but it's actually contact with Krishna. Therefore, you have the attitude of prasad seva, serving. By taking prasad, you're rendering service. You're keeping your body fit for Krishna's pleasure, and you're associating with Krishna. So as you're taking breakfast today, you're thinking, Krishna, Krishna. You think that, right? And pratyaksha is not exactly the opposite of Shabda Brahma. Jiva Goswami explains that they all work together. We don't just reject sense perception. That's a big mistake. We understand that certain things, certain subject matters, are beyond the range of our senses. But that doesn't mean a Vaishnava is lost in a world of, lost in the fog, like, I don't know how to start my car because, it's something to do with my senses, my sense perception. There's a role for everything. We're not Mayavadis. We don't reject the material energy. We reject misuse of the material energy. So yes, there's a time and a place for pratyaksha, and there's a time and place for Shabda Brahma. This is explained by Jiva Goswami and Tattva Sandarbha. You have read this? You remember? All right, you can explain to him later. All right. I thank you all for your association, and we hope to see some of you at least at the program tomorrow night. Where is it?
Gasworks Theatre.
Gasworks Theatre, just nearby. I went there some time ago for someone's wedding, or whose wedding was it? I know so many weddings here. Can't keep up with it. Every day I get requests from Melbourne. Maharaj, blessings for a wedding, blessings for a child. It's all going on. Well done, you're doing that job very nicely. Service opportunities. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.